Babysitters of Redditors, what is funniest NSFW scariest incident that happened when you babysit? Kid had a seizure. I thought he was throwing a tantrum. I said fine. You can have a cookie. But only one. Then his sister came and told me what was going on. Yeah, that wasn't fun. First time babysitting and his 12-year-old sister has to take the ropes and handle her brother having a seizure. Apparently they weren't all that rare. And were pretty mild. But it sure threw me for a loop. Especially since I hadn't been informed of this kid's epilepsy. That should have been pretty high up on the list of things to tell the babysitter. When I was 16 I was babysitting my cousin's 4-year-old. He and I were briefly speaking on the phone. And when I got off the line, I could not find her anywhere. Needless to say, I lost my shit and freaked the FCK out. I knew that her favorite game was hide and go seek, so I started wandering around the house and playfully saying, "Where is she? Is she in the kitchen? Dot. Silence. Is she in the bathroom? Dot. Silence. Is she in the closet?" And from the closet I hear, "No. Toddlers. Cute and terrifying." Babysitting a 2-year-old girl that I worked with at the daycare I taught at. I put her in her crib and I go out to watch TV. When I hear something over the baby monitor, I turn it up and she's whispering row 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 row, and then suddenly she screamed super loud. She kept doing this over and over. And it got creepier and creepier until I remember that we had just taught the kids in the daycare a new verse to row 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 your boat. If you see a crocodile, don't forget to scream, and then everyone screams. I felt so bad for teaching her that. She must have freaked her parents out a lot. Babysat twin 9-year-old boys a few years ago. The parents didn't even leave the house. They just locked themselves upstairs while I played video games and made dinner for the kids. I had to keep making the games louder to cover up the sounds that were coming out of the bedroom. A mixture of pain and pleasure. That's amazing. When will you be back? Oh. We're not leaving. But there isn't enough therapy in the world to make you okay with what you would see if you opened the bedroom door. We'll be done at 8. A spider was crawling on the ground. So the 3-year-old whipped out his penis and started peeing on it. When I was 13, I had a summer job babysitting 3 siblings. A 5-year-old girl, a 2-year-old boy, a baby boy just a few months old. One day, the 5-year-old really wanted to ride her bike. So I let her zip around the driveway for a while. When she was done, I told her to make sure she put her bike away in the garage while I took the boys inside. A few minutes later I heard some crying coming from downstairs and didn't think much of it. Thinking she'd closed the garage door and maybe it was dark and she was afraid. When she didn't come upstairs, I went down to see what was wrong. Turns out she couldn't reach the switch to close the garage door. She stood on one of her brother's ride-on car toys, which rolled out from under her, and she fell and cut her leg on a pane of glass that was nearby. Blood. Oh, so much blood. She got some stitches and her leg was put in a massive bandage for a while. The parents didn't blame me. But to this day I've felt bad about what happened. Someone hacked the video baby monitor while I was nannying once. I put the kid down for a nap and went down to make myself lunch. With the monitor set up on the kitchen counter, I heard some small noises from it, but assumed it was him moving around in his sleep. Then the guy hacking into it started singing Rockabye Baby in this creepy childlike voice. I ran up to the kid's room thinking someone had broken in and freaked the FCK out. Took me about 10 minutes to realize it was coming from the monitor. Guy kept singing as I was panicking. The asshole, and I unplugged that shitty. The parents flipped when I told them and got the cops involved. A few days later they found out it was the neighbor. Some 30-something dude living in his parents' basement. When I was 21 I was a nanny for a 4-year-old girl. We had finished swimming at their country club and were in the locker room changing. As I was changing my top she looks at me and says my mom has those too. I asked her what does she have and she said breasts. I didn't say anything and just continued getting dressed. She paused for a second and then said, except hers are really long. I had to bite my cheek to keep from laughing. Babysat 6-year-old triplets, 2 boys, 1 girl. One of them was a very sweet autistic boy. When I went to check up on the other kids for a second, the other boy had gone up the stairs, took his diaper off, and smeared poop all over the walls. I went to go clean it up with diaper wipes and threw them in the toilet. I forgot that diaper wipes, these ones, aren't flushable. So lo and behold, I had TTY wipes overflowing out of the toilet bowl and half TTY stain walls. It was a TTY day. When I was young, I babysat a few local kids. It was easy way to get cash and I was one of the oldest in the neighborhood. One of the kids had some kind of severe attachment issues. Once when I was using the bathroom, he broke the door slamming into it. He wanted to be in the same room I was, no matter what. His mother said that wasn't the first time that has happened. It was the last time for me though. Never babysat that kid again. Currently babysit 9 and 12-year-old boys. They have a lot of energy. Actually, they're just flat out nuts, and so there is constant roughhousing. One time, the 12-year-old got a little cut on his leg and started bleeding. I went to look at it, but he flinched and pushed me away. Then he proceeded to wipe the blood off of his leg, streak it under each eye, and hiss at me. The pay is good. I was babysitting a 2-year-old. He was playing on the couch pillows instead of a back cushion. My couch has a bunch of pillows. All of a sudden he started crying. He bumped his head on the corner of the couch, not sharp, and it started to profusely bleed. I grabbed him and sat him on the counter so I could see where it was coming from. Just under his eyebrow was gashed open. I cleaned it up as best as I could, gave him some children's Tylenol, and called his mom. They were able to glue it back together. I felt so bad. Oh. Thank God you can glue children back together like toys. Not a babysitter, but dated one in high school. We had just started dating, and she had to babysit a couple of her neighbor's boys, who I'm going to estimate were around 8-10 years old. Her game plan for the night was to have the kids in bed by 8:00 p.m. and get cozy on the couch. What she ended up getting was an hour of cartoons, followed by a 17-year-old guy wearing a Donatello Ninja Turtle mask and plastic BO being chased around by 2 boys with plastic swords. I can't even count how many times she said, "Alright guys, I think it's time for bed." Weird moment number 1 from that night. She says, "You're going to have a lot of growing up to do before we have kids." Relationship didn't last a month. Afterward she published a poem about my small penis to her MySpace account. Weird moment number 2. Her parents getting home and seeing a strange car in the driveway, rushing into the house and seeing their children beating up a 17-year-old with toys whilst the sitter is sitting on the couch reading Cosmo. First thing they said is, "We're not paying you to." Good times. I let my parents babysit my daughters once. When we came home, the kids were sitting close together in another part of the house. After my parents left, it was explained to us that our 2-year-old spilled milk on the table and grandpa lost it. First and last time. Had a babysitter when I was like 6 or 7 every few nights. She used to walk around in a thong, and one time I asked if I could see her boobs, so she showed them to me. Pretty sure if I was a rat bastard she could have gotten in huge trouble. But a pimp never snitches. When I was about 12 or so, I babysat a couple of brothers across the street from me. Their regular babysitter lived 2 doors down but couldn't make it, so I helped out. It ended up with me locking myself in the bedroom with the youngest brother, who was about 6 would be my guess, while the older brother tried to stab through the door with a huge butcher knife. That kid might have been 8 or so. That was definitely the last time I babysat for them. I told the other babysitter that he was on his own from now on. When I was 12, I babysat a 7-year-old girl and a 5-year-old boy. The boy went to the bathroom and then started screaming for me. So I go in and his pants are around his ankles with his head at his feet. Bare ass facing the door, and he's holding his cheeks apart. His sister walk up behind me and says you're going to have to wipe his butt, he can't do it right. I wiped the kid's butt and when the parents came home they were all, "Oh, we're so sorry, we forgot to tell you." My mom was kinda pissed off and didn't make me babysit them anymore. I was babysitting 2 little girls at their parents' house when I was about 15. We were sitting in the living room watching the Disney Channel when sudden the front door handle starts moving and someone tries to come in. I didn't lock the door after the parents left, so they were able to walk right in. Luckily, the family also had 5 dogs, all large breeds, that immediately jumped into action and ran towards the front door barking bloody murder. The front door only opened about half an inch before it was pulled shut. I jumped up and locked the doors and windows. It scared the shit out of the 3 of us. I checked to see if there was anyone outside running away, but didn't see anyone. I don't know what would have happened without those dogs. I have posted this before, but I still believe the kids I babysit are nightmares. You can tell me all you want that it is natural. I never poured water into my siblings' butthole. 7 years old, F, and 9 years old, M, take baths together. They like to touch butts together quite literally. He will have her bend over so he can take his bath pail and pour water into her butthole. Unsuccessfully, of course. There was also a lot of spanking. When it was time to get out and get dry, she would push him on his stomach on the ground and sit on top of his butt and bounce up and down like she's riding an animal. Or her brother. No. I didn't let this happen. It only happened twice and since then, they aren't allowed to take baths together. Babysat nannied for 3 kids the summer after my freshman year of college. One day the middle child ran off to play at the neighbors without telling me. Her mom and I agreed to ground her until the following day was over. A day and a half total. She had to stay home inside and clean her room. On that next afternoon, about an hour before her mom was to come home and she was to be grounded, she pulled a knife out and pointed it at me because I was ruining her life and brainwashing her mother. She chased me around the kitchen a few times before I just grabbed her arm and yanked the knife out. When I did that, I was apparently abusing her. A little shitty was used to getting her way, and thankfully I was off to my sophomore head of college 2 weeks later. So when I was 14 or 15, I babysat quite a bit for 2 families and nothing unusual. Then one day my grandmother called and asked if I could babysit overnight for her friend from work. Sure. No problem. She said I could bring a friend too. Sweet. Friend and I get dropped off at the house. Grandma's friend is a bit strange and her BF is a straight creeper. Right before they left, they said there was a cartoon all ready to go and after dinner, just press play for the kids. I honestly can't remember if this was VHS or DVD. So we ate and went to the TV room and I pressed play, and suddenly all you could hear was moaning and groaning as a very explicit PRN filled the screen. Shut it off as quickly as possible. Put the kids to bed shortly after. And then friend and I put the video back on, at a lower volume. BC we were curious. Next morning, the BF asked if we enjoyed the cartoon. When I babysat my little brother a few years ago, someone tried to break into the apartment we lived in. I was about 13 back then and we were both scared shitless. I don't know why they gave up, but I like to think it was the stench of shit wafting from my pants out of the building. As a teenager I used to babysit for my neighbors. I quickly discovered that their marriage was on the rocks when one of their daughters told me how daddy had been sleeping in a separate room. And the fact that mommy was coming home every time I was there with a different man. She would always tell me she would only be gone a few hours and would be home no later than midnight. I would end up falling asleep after the kids were put to bed and waking up at 4 AM to the sounds of her arriving home and ravaging some strange man on the front porch and then shooing him off. Her husband was a really nice man that worked his butt off doing night shifts as a nurse at the local hospital. And while he was working she was screwing around. Naturally I told my mom about it and she informed the husband because she didn't want her daughter being an accomplice in his wife's extramarital activities. They split not long after that and moved away. I was babysitting 2 brothers. One was maybe 7 and the other about 3. I should mention that the dad was a contractor and he had a lot of random construction things in the backyard. The 7-year-old picked up a doll that was about 4 feet long and pretended to be a Jedi with a double-bladed lightsaber. He wound up smacking his brother in the face and the 3-year-old was flung across the patio. The air that kid got was pretty impressive and I laughed. Until I saw that the kid was actually hurt and then I felt kind of bad. The 3-year-old was a little shitty and he had been torturing me and the older brother for the past hour though. So I didn't feel that bad. I once babysat these 2 kids a few times who lived around the corner from me who were probably 7 and 3. One day while I was on my way home from school to their house, I found them playing outside and the older girl ran up to me and said she wanted to tell me a secret about her new cat. She told me that when she squeezed its pee-pee that white stuff came out. I just kind of awkwardly said I'm okay and continued walking to their house. I never brought it up again. But it weirded me out for a while whenever I looked at her cat. Not my story but my GF's. I met her childhood babysitter a few weekends ago and after the former babysitter was out of earshot my GF casually mentioned her babysitter used to take her with her to go meet drug dealers to pick up drugs when she was like 9 years old. My first question was how did she know what a drug deal looked like when she was 9 years old? And the weird part was that her babysitter was very open about explaining what they were doing. About what all the different kind of drugs were. What they were called. What the high for each was like. Etc. I just kind of listened with my jaw dropped. This was the time I stopped babysitting while I was a teenager. First story. A coworker of my mom's needed a babysitter and I was roped into doing it. I hate kids. So these 2 boys were awful. The one kid, about 5, would go to the bathroom and then start screaming that I needed to wipe his butt. Which seemed odd because I felt he was old enough to do it. So I didn't do it. Then I was picking up some of the mess and they opened the front door and ran off. They lived in an apartment complex and not in a good part of town. So I am running around looking for the kids. I decided after that night I was never going to have kids. Second story. Kid's dad taught him to flip on the couch. They had tile floors so when he fell off the couch he hit his head pretty hard. I called my mom freaking out and had her come over and take care of the situation. A lot less sex than I anticipated. UHH. You're not supposed to have sex with the kids. It's been a whole hour now. And still no posting of a pervy dad with babysitter action. I don't know if I should feel relieved or just put the lotion and tissues away. My ex's stepmom's 14-year-old babysitter was sleeping with her husband. They lived in a pretty small town and she worked as a dispatcher for the county sheriff's office. One day, the sheriff pulled her aside at work and told her that deputies were at her house arresting her husband for statutory pay because her husband had been f***ing their babysitter. They had a stack of emails between him and the 14-year-old girl talking about the sex and him telling her they should take boys and run off together. It was a pretty messed up situation for her and her sons. Her oldest son was like 11-12 at the time and was named after him. Everyone knew what he had done because the town was so small. People even went as far as saying that the oldest boy would become a pedophile like his dad. I was babysitting this kid and he takes me to the computer to show me his cool computer game. Turns out it was a free demo disc of a flight simulator game. And it just looped through a 3-minute video of the game. And the kid had no idea he wasn't actually controlling the plane at all. Haha. Dumb kid. They also had a really old, skeletal black cat that I didn't even know existed until the kids had gone to bed and I was alone in their creepy family room and out comes this cat out of nowhere looking like death.